So today we'll be talking about, the management and governance. So we'll be looking at some of the tools that we use in managing resources, in managing enter ID objects and the likes. We'll talk about services like the policies. We'll talk about the privileged identity management to instead of assigning roles, to individual permanently. We want to see how we can actually improve our security when it comes to Azure. And that's why we have this management and governance. Learning part, we're going to be looking at the cost management because one of the things the organization focuses on is how they can actually manage their cost. So we'll take a look at how, we calculate this cost using the pricing calculator. I told you, the OPEX, which is the operational cost. Now, you are only charged for what you use. However, you can actually do a forecast, like you can calculate the price of any resource you're spinning up. Let's say I'm spinning up the virtual machine in Azure. It's going to tell you how much you are going to be spending at the end of the month if you spin up that particular virtual machine. It might be maybe $112, it might be $89. Though it doesn't mean that's the amount you'll be charged. You might be, charged lesser, far lesser than that if you actually manage that resource effectively. Like when there is no need for the machine to be on, you can actually stop the machine. If the machine is not the main server, like what we call the domain controller, is not the server that controls the other system. So there is no need for that machine to be up and running every time. Or when the machine is not hosting any application that needs to be up and running, every hour, or so there is no need for us to have that particular machine, up and running. So we'll take a look at how we can actually manage all these costs using, the cost management tool that gives recommendation on what we can do in our tenant or in our Azure environment, to help us manage this cost. We take a look at tags, so when we say tags, we are looking at how we can logically arrange or differentiate our resources in Azure. So let's say if I create a virtual machine for the IT team now, and I know this virtual machine is only being used by the IT team, I can use a tag and say the tag is going to be IT. I can have another tag to say HR. Or let's say we have a global organization. There is an office in the UK. There is another office in Nigeria. So we can use tags, to differentiate, who the resource actually belongs to. Let's say a tag saying country or office, Nigeria office, UK office. So we'll know that this is how much is being spent, by these particular guys in this office. So if you are a CSP and the CSP is, let's say you have an organization and what you do is you manage resources of different users and you want to charge each users based on their consumption. So you need something to logically separate these resources so that you know how much, that particular person or that particular customer is consuming. So you use this tag, to make that decision. We take a look at the governance, the compliances. We look at policies. So what are some of the policies that we can set in Azure? So we have policies that we'll create. We have policies that we'll put forward to say nobody should be able to create a virtual machine in the South African region. That's a policy. So if anybody tries to create a virtual machine in that particular region, it will not allow the person to do so. That particular operation would not be successful. Then we'll talk about the resource logs. The resource log, let's say we just, recruited someone into the organization and we have a virtual machine that is hosting our application. That particular virtual machine, we want to safeguard it so that somebody, maybe someone new to the organization, would not just go there and delete that resource, you know, delete that resource unknowingly. So we want to actually put, something in there to make sure that machine is always there. No one have access to delete it. So we can actually do a lock, and we'll say we'll do a resource log. Then we'll talk about the service trust portal, where you get a lot of security recommendations. Then from there, we start looking at the deployment tools that we have in Azure. The one you guys, I'm sure, whenever you try to start your sandbox, if you have been at least trying to, complete those exercises, you will notice that on the right hand side, you have one black, command line that is always created for you, which is the command, So that particular command line is the CLI. So you can manage your resources from there. But majorly, most of what we've done, like when I created the virtual machine in class, I used the portal. I logged on to the portal.azure.com. So there are different ways you can manage your resources using different tools. But majorly, we have actually focused on, the portal. So we can use the PowerShell. If you check on your system, on your Windows system right now, if you search for PowerShell, you will see that PowerShell on your system. So you can manage your resources, using that PowerShell. So we'll say you are automating, the management, which make more sense, than doing it on the portal, because it's faster. When you run your script, something you need to do for an hour, you can, just run your script within 30 seconds, and the operation keeps, um, creating whatever resource you want to create will be created for you, automatically, without you doing anything else after running your script. Then we'll talk about the Azure Resource Manager, which are related to resources like infrastructures. We talk about different services, where I explained that there are some services that are infrastructure as a service. Like when you have the virtual machine, they are presenting you, with the actual machine, or the yes, that is running maybe your application, that is running, that is hosting your file. It's not like, your Google Drive or your OneDrive, or where you only have access, to a platform where you can put in your files and folder. But when you are presented with the Azure, the main machine, the underlying technology that is hosting that your file and folder and applications, then we'll say you are making use of infrastructure as a service. And so how do any resource that you try to deploy in Azure, how do they even get there? You just try to do it from the GUI, from the portal, by, setting some basic requirement, like putting the name of the virtual machine you want to create, putting the resource group. Then when you click on create, you will notice that you will be redirected to another page where you will see deployment in progress if you have done it. Then so the ARM, which is the Azure Resource Manager, is the one performing that operation, making sure your resource is being created. Then from there, we'll go to the monitoring tools. No matter what you create in Azure, or no matter what you create in the cloud, you want to monitor, you know, that particular service. Let's say you have an application running in Azure. You want to make sure that your application is being monitored. In case there is a downtime, you want to, get an alert, or before the downtime, you want to always check the resource to be sure that, okay, this resource is still good, is healthy, and is able to, manage my application, host my application. So we have the Azure Monitor, Azure Advisor that gives you recommendation to say, hey, this is your resource is actually in an unhealthy state, or we soon get to an unhealthy state. Do this, do this, do this. Then, like the typical example I gave in the class, saying, when Jumia came, they started doing Black Friday, and that first Black Friday resulted to Jumia sites being down. The server that was running those applications, the incoming traffic was more than whatever resource or whatever compute power the server had at that particular time. So it was more than what it could actually cater for. And with that, you know, the server went down. Jumia site was down for a moment. If you have this Azure Advisor, it will tell you, hey man, you're getting to a limit. What do you want to do? Do you want to add more resource? Do you want to add more compute power? The Azure Edge service will tell you what's the status of that your resource at that particular time. If that particular resource, is healthy, unhealthy, so depending, and the monitor, you can actually see whatever is going on you know, in that particular resource you spin up. So those are the things we'll be talking about. Let's start, going one slide after the other. Then at least we'll be able to discuss more about it. If you have any question, please do let me know at any point in time. So let's start with the cost management. So like we said, so these are things we'll be looking at. We'll talk about, the factors that affect the cost in Azure. We'll look at the pricing calculator, the cost of ownership. That's cost of the pricing calculator gives you, it speculates how much you will spend at the end of the month if you spin up a resource. It will tell you if you are using this resource per month, you'll be spending this particular amount. However, like I said, you might not even have to pay up to that if you manage that resource effectively. But it gives you that forecast to say at the end of the month, if you use this virtual machine 24 hours, 24/7, you might need to pay £113, per month. But so that's what the pricing calculator, before you even create your resource, you will get how much you'll be spending, or you will be charged at the end of the month. Then, which is different from the total cost of ownership. The total cost of ownership is, let's say you are trying to move your server, or you are trying to move your application that is being hosted on your on-premises environment into Azure. So Azure will tell you, use the total cost of ownership to compare how much you'll be spending if you migrate this particular application or server to Azure, to the cloud, compared to when you leave that particular application on your on-premise environment. So when we get there, you will see what the difference will be over time, because if you are the one hosting your application, aside the fact that you will purchase the server, you purchase the computer systems that you need to host those applications, you still need to, put in some operation cost, like, you pay for light, you pay for cooling system, you manage the network, you manage the server, you manage a whole lot of things. And let's even say in a region where the power is not stable, then you need to still get generator, get some solar panel, change those batteries on solar panel when it's out. So compared to when you have this your service running in Azure, so you can compare, how much you will spend, and if you decide to move to the cloud, or if you decide to have it, on your on-premises environment. So that's what the total cost of ownership will give you. From there, we'll go to the Azure cost management tools. Then the purpose of tags, like I've said, is just for you to logically separate your resources. Now, so let's start with what are some of the factors that affect our cost. The resource type that you are creating actually is one of the biggest factors. Are you creating a virtual machine? Are you creating a storage account, or you are just creating maybe a database? So costs are actually specific. That each resource has a specific cost attached to it. So because when you are creating a virtual machine, you are going to create some other resources like virtual network. Your virtual machine cannot be created without you creating a virtual network where you attach that virtual machine to. When you create a virtual machine, you still need to create an hard disk for that particular machine. So you need a storage account. So there are lots of things that you need to create when you are creating a virtual machine. So that means you will spend more when you have a virtual machine compared to when you have a virtual network. So depending on the resource you are creating, this actually affects the costing. Then the consumption, like we said, is pay as you go model. If you do not need that machine to be running 24/7, you can always make sure that you turn off that virtual machine at the end of the day. This will save you a lot of cost. Then we'll talk about the maintenance, where you can actually look at how to mitigate your costing by, like I said, making sure that when machines are not used, you have them shut down. So that's part of the maintenance. When they are not used, you have them shut down. There is no need for you to have multiple network resources running if you only need maybe a subnet and within your particular VNet. So you want to just minimize the costing. If you do not need maybe a public IP, you don't need to create it when you don't need it. So you want to make sure that you minimize what you are spending, by making sure you are maintaining that particular machine yeah, every now and then. Then another thing we talked about, I'm sure when we talked about the region, I said depending on the region where you create your virtual machine or where you create your resource, this also have an effect on how much you will spend at the end of the day. So a virtual machine of the same size, of the same configuration, when you spin up that virtual machine in South Africa region, the costing might be different when you spin it up in East UK or East Europe. So it doesn't mean that you need to say, yes, is far cheaper there, then let me go and spin it up. So there are a lot of things we need to consider, like the data protection, So because of regional data protection, you need to always make sure, or where your customers are. If you host your application in Russia, uh, because maybe the app service is cheaper there, and your customers are actually accessing it from Nigeria. That doesn't make any sense because it's too far from the users that are actually using that application, and that will cause latency. What we call latency would you won't get a fast response when user is trying to access that particular website. And that's why we want to make sure we spin it very close to our customer. We spin it within our region. So wherever you spin your resource actually have effect on how much you'll be paying at the end of the day. Then network traffic in the sense that incoming traffic, you are not being charged for incoming traffic. Let's say you host an application, or let's even take, for instance, you are backing up your files, your on-premises files in Azure using Azure Backup. Then you will not be charged when you push your files and folder to that particular backup environment. But when you want to extract your folder, or when you want to download your folder, you might be charged for the traffic. So as you can see, inbound data transfer are free. However, sometimes you might be charged when you're using the outbound data, maybe when you're trying to get those backup back from where you saved them. Then the type of subscription that you are using also depends, also have effect on how much you'll be paying at the end of the day. So you still, all these things, just try to at least keep them in mind. Now you still get to understand more about it. So when we say subscription, there are different subscriptions, but for now, for this purpose, you guys only know about the sandbox subscription, which gives you access to some resources, some. But when you start using some other subscription, like pay as you go subscription, like MSDN subscription, when you become a technical trainer, then so depending on the subscription that you're using, you'll be the cost will be actually different. Then let's move on to the marketplace. Marketplace, just see the marketplace like where you can get any resource in Azure. It's just like the normal, marketplace in the real world, in the real sense, where you go to, shop for your household items. Yeah, so this is the same thing we have here. So any resource is not only Azure resource only. There are some resources that were created by Microsoft only, but in the marketplace, you can get resources, that are actually created by different vendor or other vendors aside Microsoft. But the most of the resources that you have in Azure are the ones created by Microsoft. However, there are some other resources created, or services that are created by other vendors, other organizations. So this is where you go to, to get. So all those virtual machine, those storage accounts that we are spinning up, we are spinning them up from the marketplace. So when we go in there to say create a resource, it takes us to the marketplace. So the marketplace is where we spin up those resources from. Then we have the pricing calculator that I spoke about. Like I said, depending on the resource that you want to create, you can check how much you'll be spending at the end of the month. And we just talked about some of the factors that affect the cost depending on the resource you're creating. It might be region, it might be the tier in the sense that, let's say you are creating a storage account, you want to create the hot tier. We said at the end of the day, it's faster than the cold tier or the cool tier or the archive tier. That means if it's faster, if you are using the hot tier, that means you will be spending more than when you use the cold tier. When we talk about the storage account, so the billing options, maybe it's pay as you go, pay per consumption, the support option. So there are three different support options when it comes to Azure. We have what we call the severity A. That means there is a downtime, and you need it to be resolved as soon as possible. So when you raise that kind of ticket, you know, you'll be attended to within 1 hour or 2 hours. Can't even remember again. Then, depending on support option you've actually, you're going with, maybe it's the premium support or the normal professional support, so that can actually cost you also. Then, what program are you using this for testing? Is this production environment? So this is what you see on the pricing calculator. You can calculate how much you will spend at the end of the day when you put in everything that is needed. It will tell you the upfront, no upfront, but it will tell you how much,
you might be asked to pay at the end of the day. So it gives you an estimate of how much that particular resource will cost you at the end of the month. So this is one exercise. I will try to drop it so you can check, the pricing calculator. It works work really good. You can review the pricing. Then let's go ahead to the cost of ownership, which I just explained. That let's say you want to migrate your resources to Azure. You want to compare how much you'll be spending when you migrate those resources, those servers, those applications from your on-premises to the cloud, and how much you'll be spending if you decide to leave them at the end of the day. So can you see we have, you know, um, a comparison here? You can see this is how much this particular organization will be spending. So compared to Azure within that particular time, so in Azure, the user will be spending, or the company, the organization will spend up to this amount, which is 595,000, 618, compared to, spending 30 million because of the data center, because there will be a lot of things that will be done at that particular time. Compared to this, you are only spending more on, the networking, the storage, where you're storing. So when you create a resource, it's being stored somewhere for you. So you have to pay for storage. So when you have the compute, nothing is being spent on data center anymore, because you do not need a data center to, when you host it in Azure, it's being hosted for you. The data center is, is being managed for you. Then the networking, so the storage, the compute. So you can see, so you can use the cost of ownership to compare how much you'll be spending if you leave those resources on premises against when you have them migrated to Azure. Then so we have another exercise there, which is I will try to drop all the exercises today so that you can go review that. This shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes for each of these exercises. It's just for you to check, how much you'll be spending. So then we move on to the cost management. Like I said, this is another good tool in Azure. It gives you, that budget, that estimate of how much you will be spending at the end of the month based on all the resources that you have created in your environment. So you can see this is saying, yeah, you guys have actually consumed 2,746, but based on your usage, based on how you guys are using these, at the end of the day, you might need to pay 4,500. If you are using Eon Nest, in the UK for power, you will notice that whenever you want to set up a direct debit, they will tell you based on your usage, we recommend you set this amount, because they are looking at, they are estimating how much you might be using at the end of the month, even when you might use more than that or lesser than that, but it's an estimate. It tells you. So that's the same thing the cost management is doing. It's telling you, guy, what you're using, the way you're using these resources, you might spend up to this at the end of the month. So it gives you recommendation on how to actually minimize that cost, and that's why so you can also set an alert to say we don't want to spend more than 3,500. When it gets to 3,002 or get to 3,005, please send us an alert to say we've actually exceeded our budget. So you can decide to say that particular resource should not run again until the following month, or you want to go ahead to run the machine and keep paying. So the cost management tool gives you all these benefits. Then I talked about the tag already, which I explained. This is used to logically organize your resources. So you want to organize this in the sense that you have an organization. We want to even separate, each department, and we want to know who is actually misusing all these resources. So for every resource that you create, you want to tag them to say, yes, this resource belongs to, oh, can I move from there? This resource belongs to Joe, and Joe works in the marketing department. this particular virtual machine or resource is used in production. It's not for testing. So if it's for testing, we want to see how much you guys are spending, on testing resources compared to production resources. So that's what, this does. Okay, so we'll move on to governance and compliances. Let me see. Can we get to do that? Yeah, I think we should be able to. Yeah, it shouldn't take us that much. Then tomorrow we can talk about the tools and the like. So governance and compliances, so we'll describe the Azure policies, like I said, just the same way we have our upper chamber guys, set up policies to say, you guys now, you should not have dollar account if you don't work for a foreign organization. Why do you have to open a dollar account? We'll convert all your money to naira. So they are making laws. So the same way they make laws there are laws you can actually make in Azure environment also, which is what we call the policy. So you can make a policy to say nobody should be allowed to create a virtual machine in South Africa region. All the virtual machine should only be created within the UK region. So if you try to create a virtual machine and you select the virtual machine, the South Africa region, it will not allow you to. The same way, if you have been using the sandbox, if you try to create a new resource group aside that learn resource group and you try to create another resource, it will tell you you do not have the right to. So these are policies that have been set to make sure people are actually compliant. Because if we say our organization is a UK organization and you go ahead to spin up our virtual machine in a South Africa region, that means you've taken it out of Europe. That means the organization is not data compliant anymore because their data is actually out of their region. So in order to manage this effectively, we'll set what we call the policy, the Azure policy, to say if a customer is or a user is trying to do this, which is not allowed, please do not allow it, the operation to be completed. And the resource logs, like I said, when we talk about, and that's what the policy says, it just enforce organization standard, so that all resources meet compliances. Then the resource log is just to protect resources. Let's say a new guy just joined the organization, and we've actually given this new guy, some permissions to be able to create virtual machine, delete virtual machine. But we have this particular machine that must not be deleted because it's the domain controller. So we can put a lock to say if this person doesn't have this permission, is not added as part of the people that can remove the lock. You will always see that lock there, but you cannot remove it. So that resource cannot be accidentally deleted. You understand? So, and that's why we do the resource log. So you can actually assign maybe a read only. The user can only see that there is a log there, but they cannot delete the log. So it makes sure that resources are actually prevented from maybe modification or accidental deletion. So work two, I was supposed to do a work two for this, but I can suspend that till next 2 weeks. But yeah, but you can actually do a work two also. It's just for you to create a resource. Okay, let me see if I can use the work two to end the class today. So let's just keep it for now. I'll come back to it. Then we have the service trust, which is like a portal that gives you that, like a dashboard, tells you, if your resources are compliant, if they are secure, So that's what the service trust portal does. The purview is just for you to have, your data. You want to be able to view all your data in one place. Let's say you have files and folders, you have data on-premises environment, you have data on AWS environment, you have it on Google, you do not want to log into Google or log into AWS on your premises to start viewing this data. So you want to have an insight to all this data in just one dashboard. So that's what the Azure Microsoft Purview gives you. Yeah, I think that's that. So let's just do this walkthrough and we can end the class today. So this walkthrough is saying, okay, let me see. I'm going to share my screen now. Just give me some minutes. I want to see where this particular walkthrough is. 900. I'm still with you guys, please. Cost management. Okay. All right, so you can see this is what the resource log is asking me to create a resource log. So I'm going to do this. No, where is it? Yeah, so I'm going to do this. So yeah, it's asking me to create, a resource. Then from resource, you do a read-only resource. I need to add, that particular read-only resource log. Then we can update the log, remove the log, and that's the same thing that's been applied here. Let me just log in. Great. Okay, I'm just going to use my Azure Portal environment. So yeah, okay. So yeah, let's say I have a resource. I'm just going to use one of the resources I've created in the past. I'm going to pick one of these resources. So yeah, under each of these resources, you can see the settings which talked about the lock. So here you can add a resource lock. So it now depends on the kind of lock you want to add. So if it's just a read-only lock or you want to have it as delete lock. So depending on the lock, so you can see here, this guy is telling me to apply only a read-only lock. Then when you do that, then you can now add a container. So this is it. If the person is trying to now, so when you create a read only, that means you cannot modify. That's the difference. So when you do a delete lock, that means when you do this delete lock, that means that particular resource cannot be deleted. But when you do a read only lock, that means that particular resource cannot be modified. And that's what you see here. So when you create the storage account and any user now tries to modify that particular storage account by maybe creating another container within that storage account, you will get the error to saying this scope cannot, this particular person cannot do a write operation. That means that particular person cannot, or you cannot perform, you cannot create additional resource within you know, that particular resource because you cannot modify it. And that's why the resource lock is there. So if you go ahead and change, the resource lock, maybe to delete or you remove it, then the user will be able to, perform that particular. This is the delete lock. They change it from the read only to the delete lock. And with that, the user was trying to delete the particular storage account. And you will see this is the error is getting to say this particular account cannot be deleted because the resource has a delete lock. So you can set up a read-only lock by saying read only. You want to give it a note to say do not delete, or you can even add, a delete lock. So if I try to delete this particular machine,
you get that particular error to say this this machine has a delete lock and cannot be deleted. So, and that's not applying force. Cannot be deleted. So that's it. You can see here because this machine has a lock. So you need to remove the lock before you can delete it, even when I was the one that created this machine. So if you don't remove that lock, you will not be able to, remove that particular resource from Azure. The same way the read-only works, you cannot modify that particular resource if you have the read-only resource. Adewale, please go ahead, please. Your question.
Oh, good morning, sir. Uh, my question, the first question I have is, can we do this kind of exercise without creating a virtual machine? That was the first one. And the second question is, like what I'm just trying to understand what you're saying because I have some files on my system, like my system that each time I try to delete them, it will say read only, you cannot delete this file.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And personally, I'm not the one that lock it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible for me to now, like you said, that you cannot modify it?
So when you have the permission, you can modify. So if you notice that, so let me go back to where I was the other time. So now, if I go back to, if I have the permission, like I have the permission to create the lock. You understand? That means I will also have the permission to delete this lock. You understand? So there are some users, maybe you are not an admin, so you will still not have the permission to delete this lock. Do you understand? That means you will not still be able to modify that particular resource or that particular file. You get what I'm saying? So until the person that have the permission to remove the lock removes the lock, that's when you will be able to modify or delete that particular resource. Do you get it now? It's the same
Okay.
way. The second question is, you know, it is not compulsory you have a virtual machine to perform this. Like I said, there are lots of other resources that you can create. If you notice here in this their example, they never created a virtual machine. What they used for this particular exercise is storage account. You understand? So they created a storage account and they set up a delete lock on there while trying to, or read only lock while trying to create a container, and they were not able to. So it is all those exercises are not related to virtual machines, even when the virtual machine is the underlying technology. You see the storage account we are creating, we are still creating them on a virtual machine, but you cannot see the virtual machine now. You understand? Because the type of service you requested for is not a virtual machine. You understand? You only requested for a storage account, but where is the storage account created on? It's still on a machine. You understand? The same way when you do an app service, when you do any other resource in Azure, database, it's still created on a machine. But at that particular time, the kind of service you are requesting for, you are creating, is not the machine on its own or itself. You understand? So depending on what you're doing, it's not compulsory you have to create a machine to complete that particular exercise. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. So if that is all, okay, Falajin, please go ahead with your question, please.
Okay, sorry, quickly. I want to confirm something. This CLI automatically when it is open, that's when the sandbox is activated.
Mm.
It takes us to the PowerShell.
CLI,
Am I right?
the part, yes.
Okay, is it that you just type bash to be in the bash
If you want to change
environment?
it, yeah. Or if you want to change it back to CLI, you can change it from there.
Is the
You
bash
know,
that you call the CLI as well? Am I
you can
right?
do the bash. So yes, so the CLI works the same way the bash works. So you have used
Okay.
Linux before, you understand. So that
Mm.
those bash scripts that we used to run on Linux is the same thing you run on CLI.
which is just the same thing
Okay.
like your command prompts. You understand? So we run those.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay. Then please, quickly as well, I want to ask this question. When migrating to the cloud,
Yeah.
let's say that we have an on-premises already existing and we want to migrate to the cloud environment. An assessment will need to be done on
Yes.
my resources, like
Yeah.
my
Your on-premise resource. Yeah.
my infrastructures. But for a new customer that does not even have an on-premises, that is just going straight to the cloud directly,
Yes.
will there be any assessment or
No,
something,
no
or
assessment. They are
how do
just
you know
creating
the kind of
machine they need.
resources,
That's
yes,
why
that you need?
that's why we always have a solution architect in the organization. So the solution architect, that's their job to say this is the the solution architect is an advisor, so they give advice on the kind of resource that suits that organization depending on what the organization is trying to do. Do you understand? So as a cloud engineer also, you also double as a solution architect. You'll be able to at least say yes, for cost management, for better performance, we should have this particular service, maybe Kubernetes, as against virtual machine running our application, because of availability, because of elasticity. So these are things that need to you need to be advised on. So, and that's why we have solution architects in the organization.
Please, if I may ask, is Azure admin, is it different from an Azure engineer?
It's the same thing. Azure engineer, Azure administrator. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other question? Okay, if none, we'll call it a day. So tomorrow we'll talk about the tools, then we'll round it up. All right. Bye, everyone.